So, ladies and gentlemen,
Test.
we continue with our session today with a different block of speeches on medicine. And let me present to you Lily Wittersko, SVAI. Welcome.
Hi. Before I get started, can I get a feel of who we have in the audience with us today? Can you please raise your hand if you're a medical professional? I like this. I like this. Any biological researchers? Any AI researchers? Enthusiasts. Enthusiasts for health, AI health. I like these. This is very honest. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. So today's talk is about creating an open community that is empowered enough to accelerate AI for biology and medicine. A mouthful, but I'll go ahead and dive into it. So I have to do two things at once. I have a speaker note, so bear with me. So a little bit of personal background. Actually, I first want to take a moment to appreciate the fact that we're all here today as highly curious individuals, AI enthusiasts, who recognize the opportunity AI has given us to innovate the medical space. After this talk, I highly recommend that you approach me because I want to hear your stories. So I'm going to start off by sharing a bit of my background and how it led me to my work at SVI today. So in terms of my academic background, I did my undergraduate at UC Berkeley and I studied genomics and data science. So in terms of data science, that just meant getting a very strong foundation in theoretical linear algebra, probability theory, and some CS. That's how I could try to understand the balance between the two. And during that time, I was heavily involved in SVAI as a participant. I got to know the founder. We really agreed on values. So what I thought could really be more developed in this organization was the technology and data, and that's how I ended up leading that work and many projects related to that. So for me, I've ultimately had a long-term engineering interest, and what that was equivalent to was just being empowered to build. That was the first time I felt empowered to just build anything from scratch, just from your computer, and it's not expensive. I also had a strong medical interest since I was young, and that made me feel empowered to help. So by combining the two, then I feel like I could scale the type of help that I'm interested in doing. So, despite the fancy title, I really do just see myself as a community member of the movement. And this movement is to challenge the conventional privatized medical innovation model. We do this by seeking an open research structure that facilitates a community of researchers, both in the biomedical space as well as the AI space, in Silicon Valley, to help patients uncover novel insights that can ultimately help them in some way. And we'll kind of dive into a few examples. So in this talk specifically, I want to motivate it by diving into the major ingredients at our organization and hopefully how it could be applied to all of you, which is our community, our research, and our foundational technology. So very candidly, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the work of my community. They are a huge part of our innovation potential. We have research members that contribute in various interdisciplinary expertise, but to be honest, they're very siloed domains, from what I do from experience. We also have patients who are the patients we work with are incredibly resilient and choose to be empowered by sharing their medical data with us. So with our community, we catalyze computational biomedical research through hackathons, which are basically research sprints for professionals. When these sprints bring out promising technological insights, we can then push them through our research continuation program. We'll go ahead and explore some of these insights to understand how AI can empower
for novel medical insights. And as a side effect, we'll also just end up learning some foundational technology and resources we need to do this type of research. So a little bit of background, our community consists of 8,000 members, where a large majority of them are students, either undergrad or graduates, professors or industry professionals in the computational bio and AI space. Since we've kickstarted our research, we've received a total of 604 research applicants, and we work with about 150 researchers per hackathon. So overall, we've received a total of 42 final GitHub submissions that are actually open, and you're welcome to access it to learn a bit about the technology. We achieved these numbers after being in operation for a short 2.5 years. So without further ado, let's dive into the research event. Okay, I lied a little bit. So before we dive into the major goal striking, the research, we need to set the stage. So we need to know what key components our members need in order to even conduct this type of research. So first, we need a physical location. When working with this community, the research we facilitate is computational research. So theoretically, the research doesn't need everyone to be in the same room. However, that's exactly where the magic happens. We see that bringing people together physically in the same room for the first time, it brings a sense of community. And when we have highly capable individuals who can actually see themselves as a team, they are much greater than the sum of their parts. Second, we need the data. At a minimum, we strive to collect genomic data, which can be whole genome sequencing data or whole exome sequencing data, as well as transcriptome data and clinical data. We currently have been, for our next research event, we're actually planning to work with metabolic data as well. So the third major thing we need is to leverage computational power. If anyone has ever attempted to run a whole genome analysis on your computer, you know it's bad. It's really slow, easily fastest method to make you feel like a decade older when you're waiting for one analysis to finish an average of 8 or more hours. So instead, we compute on a cloud. Specifically, we have our partner, which is Google Cloud Platform, who's given us $150,000 in computational credit. And from there, we can spin up multiple instances to exponentially speed up the analysis. Also, you're welcome to raise your hand anytime to ask questions. There's no stupid questions. Oh yeah, and finally we have partners. We explained one of our partners, which is Google Cloud Platform, but we interact with multiple industry leaders as well as academic teams. Academic teams from like Harvard or Stanford or UC Berkeley. I'm a little biased towards UC Berkeley, so. So yeah, without further ado, let's start to explain some of these insights that are generated. From our first hackathon, which is for NF2, it stands for neurofibromatosis type 2, which is a genetic neurological disease. And our patient, which we had the pleasure to work with, was, oh no. So in June 2017, he decided to sequence his own genome, as well as his brother's genome. And he tried to do this and generate insights because no doctors could give him any treatments. There was just no industry treatments at the time. And he found the founder, and they were good friends, and they decided like, well, Pete, who's the founder, he's just like, well, if you have a community of people in the AI and biomedical space, what is their potential mode of production if they had this type of data? So that's where we started first launching our research event. And for our first one, we had 150 engineers and biologists who came to the Google Launchpad in San Francisco to use AI as well as computational bio for NF2 research. The event was widely publicized, which is important because the patient needed that type of exposure. Oh yeah, he also started his own company after that. So interesting stuff that happens when you have collaboration. Yeah, so just really quickly, this is just a summary of like what was at this research event. We had 409 applicants, We ultimately were very rigorous in who we picked, and we had 150 invited participants. We received a total of 25 final GitHub submissions, and we had 12 media pieces published. So, who was a part of our community? So just some really quick stats. You're probably curious, what is this rigorous selection process? So initially, in our applicant pool, which is from our pool of researchers in our community, 29% were advanced. That meant that they had extensive experience in the industry, or they had extensive experience in academia, or just general experience playing with this data, this type of data. Intermediate just means they have a very robust foundation. I would consider myself like strongly foundational, not an expert. And others were just beginners. And the thing is, we were open to beginners because they ultimately were very innovative in their solutions, and I respected that they were willing to work with other experts, and there's just this openness that allowed them to learn a lot as well, which is a huge part of our research community. Ultimately, we accepted 53% who were intermediate, 13% who were, the color is bad, isn't it? The green. Greens are hard to contrast, but 13% was beginner, and 35% was finally like advanced people. So this is for their AI data science expertise. When it came to their level of genomics, bioinformatics, drug discovery expertise, that's much harder to find. You need extensive experience. It's a ramp up to even learn. So for that reason, we've had 23% who are advanced and 29% who are intermediate, and that's ultimately the pool of people we accepted. Because understand that even though I separated data science and biological expertise, one single participant like myself, I could be intermediate in AI, and then I could also be beginner in genomics. So it's I tried to separate out the stuff. Might be a little bit confusing, but we'll go ahead and dive into our first major, I guess, research approach from a very interesting team, very interdisciplinary, very interesting team from this hackathon. So they were called AutoNF2, and they applied an unsupervised transfer learning approach to identify novel targets. This is going to get very technical a little fast, so I actually want you guys to be candid to tell me just like at what level do you want details, because I know that it might fly over the top of your head, and I do want you guys to like learn as much as possible. How many of you guys are okay with me doing a deep dive? How many of you want me to try to make it as light as possible? Indifference, okay. Go for it. Okay, I'm gonna go for it. You guys are gonna learn a lot and not even know it. Cool, so just a little bit of background, you've probably never heard of NF2. So NF2 is a very rare, I mentioned very rare neurological disease, and it increased the risk for other tumors in the nervous system. What this means is that it increases your chances to develop a tumor, like especially in your eyesight area or your ears, so that it contributes to even benign tumors, contribute to hearing as well as sight loss. This was very scary for Ono. He communicated this to us during the hackathon, and it really was an intimate moment. Under the NF family, we have also NF1. NF1 is a little bit more common, but ultimately for NF2, we have very limited resources and data, which makes it really hard for us to identify novel therapeutic targets. Because we're not interested in common diseases, we're interested in working with undiagnosed or rare disease patients, because they don't have any hope. So with the AutoNF2 team, we applied an unsupervised transfer learning approach to identify these targets, to try to identify these targets. So I'm gonna just break it into two building blocks. In terms of concept, I'll try to keep it very high level. So transfer learning, you do it when, one of the reasons you might want to do it is when you have limited training data. So our intuition is that we had a larger data set with NF1, which is under the same NF family. So you want to train with that first. And then from there, you want to use that pre-trained model and use it to train NF2. Then our second building block is to have some level of interpretability. So this team used an autoencoder for dimensional reduction. And an autoencoder is basically trying to regenerate your input. It forces the network to go, it kind of like does dimensional reduction on the inside, and then it pushes, and it has to do decoding and like push it back out and try to reproduce your input. So it forces a very efficient, I'm trying to do two things at once. Please let me know if you are lost because you don't see it. But with an autoencoder, it basically forces a network to generate very efficient encoding of features. And the thing is, like right where you see the red box, that's where we could define, I guess, weights. Weights are associated to each node, and they contain information about maybe what features may be most important. So, for example, if you had a large weight from going from A to B, then it might signify that gene A could potentially influence the biological property underlying node B. And our input vector is of gene expression. FPKM is just like the actual measured unit, measurement unit. I'm not saying it correct, but it's okay. So overall, with these two things, when you have transfer learning approach applied with this autoencoder, it sets this building block for a multi-step gene learning pipeline. Don't be overwhelmed. I'll just go ahead and dive in. So as I mentioned, we have NF1 data. We have way more NF1 data than NF2. So for that reason, we train an autoencoder and create this pre-trained autoencoder that we then throw our NF2 data into. So this, do you guys mind if I walk over? I don't have a pointer. So you have this pre-trained autoencoder, and it goes, and we use it for NF2 data because we don't have enough of it. So this is a transfer learning process. And then from there, you have a final model. And I mentioned before that the weights might be important. So you want to extract these weights, which creates this intermediate output, which the weights might represent gene significance. From there, you want to throw this block into now an abstracted module. Now you want to understand the biology under this. So you use that autoencoder weights that represent gene significance, and you look at the network weight standard deviations to isolate genes that may be significant. You use standard deviation because you want to know relatively. Yeah. Oh, really? I have 5 minutes. I'll just go ahead and push forward then. So you have a neural net, but there is a lack of interpretability here. You don't know if these weights of significance are actually true. So then what you use is a conventional genomic approach. And you see, basically, if you look at gene expression for normal cells versus cancer cells, the color difference is what you want to look at. If there's a starking, distinguished color difference, that means that gene expression is different for that particular gene, I guess relative to the cancer version of that gene. When that individual has a cancer. So, moving forward, we noticed that, okay, we basically validated that these heavier weights correspond to, it's true, there's something significant about them. So what we did is that we took all of them and we wanted to understand how do they make up each piece of the story. So then we noticed all these genes are connected to microRNA 200A. So I'll just push forward because I don't have that much time. But basically we showed a linkage and then you do interpretation after that. And we did have a truly interdisciplinary team. We had someone who's a cancer researcher, we had someone who was a software engineer, someone that was doing CS in business, and we also had a CS in bio student. And they were able to come up with all this together equally. So really quickly for this team, what was very interesting is that they basically had, what makes them interesting is that their work highlighted the potential of drug repurposing using a type of breast cancer therapeutic to treat NF2. So I won't dive into the approach, but ultimately the result is that we saw, when we look at mutational signatures of cancer, that Ono's mutational signature, most commonly represented signature 3, which is found in hereditary breast cancer. And for that reason, we thought that, hey, it's possible to do drug repurposing given that this cancer seems to have a very similar pathway to breast cancer. Now, moving forward, we also had our patient Bill, and I just want to quickly dive into just the possibilities of novel insights that you can obtain. So I won't do deep dives, but really quickly, we had a team called Deeper Drugs, which super innovative team, and what they did was that they designed a CRISPR-Cas9 repair design, and he threw that into a deep learning drug discovery pipeline. Yes, that is possible. And then we had Alzing, which modeled the tumors as a time series across like the tumor stage for each subtype of this person's cancer. Two more teams, Down the River, very quirky team. They created a very, very sophisticated pipeline that ultimately identified 25 peptides with high MHC binding affinity. You don't need to know what that is. But Express Force was probably the most innovative in that they created basically Netflix for genes. Yeah, so just overall, this research program is meant to contribute to real ongoing cases of rare patients or undiagnosed patients. And we want to create interdisciplinary opportunities in AI and biomedicine. We also produce open learning materials because we are about making sure that everyone can learn. We're not about silos. That's the opposite of what we are. And ultimately, by having this openness to our data, it's a side effect of trying to create an open community where we see these types of results. So, in summary, in order to do this type of work with the community, partnerships are important. Knowing what a sense of community is also important. Operational excellence, in terms of just like operating this business, is very important. And in terms of characteristics, curiosity, alignment with the mission, as well as resilience, because this is all very hard stuff to learn, is necessary. Yeah, so we're a nonprofit. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, and I think we have just enough time for a couple of questions.
Thank you for an interesting talk. I have a question. I feel it is a motif that gene expression data is highly dependent on sequencing platform, algorithm design, and something like that, and it brings really high technical dispersion in the raw data. And how your autoencoders deal with that? You just expect that this hidden representation will be invariant on all of this?
So you mean in terms of like having the raw data and how do you convert it to a form that is robust? Like both like the cleaning of it as well as like maybe you're generating a variant file and like making sure that the bioinformatics tool used for it was competent, right? We actually do the pre-cleaning and the filtering and all of that stuff ourselves, and then we ultimately hand our community clean files to work with.
I see. So this is done before the actual deep learning stage.
Exactly.
I see. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Do you mind if I click on?
As we wait for our next speaker, with Alexander Zhavrankov, with presentation on artificial intelligence for aging research and productive longevity.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for this introduction. I'll try to make a dramatic entrance again, I guess. So, how many of you know in Silico? Can you raise your hand? Okay, so a few people here. So, pleasure to be here. We are an AI company focusing on health and longevity. We're global. We're in 9 countries right now. We are one of the top 100 AI companies by CB Insights. We are a Frost & Sullivan best practices company for AI in North America and also in Asia. So just in case I don't have time to cover a lot of our research, I wanted to give you this slide so you can picture it and go to PubMed in Silico plus medicine. You'll have about 60 papers. Those are some of the highlights. There are many more. We were one of the pioneers in generative adversarial networks for novel molecular design. First papers published in that area, first validation experiments, first molecule lysis. We're one of the first companies to start using deep learning for diagnostics. We just recently published a special issue in Molecular Pharmaceutics. It's a American Chemical Society journal, reasonably high impact. All pharma companies read that. And here we had a representation. So you're all familiar with GANs, right? And kind of a representation of GAN, or the human. And actually, that lady works for us. She is one of our deep learning scientists at the University of Oxford, Polina Momoshina, so reasonably famous. And in this particular special issue, I profiled and highlighted 3 papers that we published. So this one, Entangled Conditional Outcome Quarter for the Knowledge of Discovery, it actually has experimental validation of our molecules. So it's not just theory. So we synthesized, tested, and showed that some of the DDR3 kinase inhibitors that we specifically designed for DDR3 are specific to DDR3 and not DDR2, which is very, JAK3 kinase. Here, DDR kinase is a separate experiment. So JAK3 kinase inhibitors were specific to JAK3 and not binding to JAK2. And it's very difficult for superhuman abilities. So human medicinal chemists cannot do that. But today I want to talk to you about a few kind of more philosophical things. And I want to talk to you about life. So this is how life looks like. We are evolutionary tailored to come to this world, grow, reproduce, take care of our young, and then gradually decline and eventually die. So pretty much at maybe 35 to 40 for males, and for females it's actually younger, you start to degrade on many levels. So evolution and nature in general, it's not a very fair system. So you do a lot to come to this peak, and after that you gradually decline. So if you are an Olympic athlete, you work your entire life to maybe push the record marginally, and then you have the entire kind of life in front of you, decline and decay. It's not fair. If you prevent things, if you actually do dieting and exercise, you are going to push this boundary a little bit to the left, from my side it's to the left, from your side it's to the right. So, but it's still a very marginal improvement. So yeah, currently the longest lived human is 123 and a half, and even that is questionable. And that lady quit smoking at 107, I think. So really behavior does not really improve your longevity. So we need to find a way to intervene. And also from the philosophical perspective, so there are many ways to score humans. So imagine that this life is a video game. You can, most of the people optimize for money, net worth, or reputation if you're a scientist, or some people would like to be happy, have a number of kids, have all kinds of experiences, skills. Some athletes go for physical performance. Again, it's kind of a marginal one-time event, and then it's a continuous gradual decline and decay. Some people go for power, political power, but I want to introduce a new term called quality. So how many of you know quality? Okay, some people do. So it's a very famous term in healthcare economics. So imagine that, again, this life is a video game. I just published a Forbes article 2 days ago on how to play a game of life. So basically, you come into this life, you start with, let's say, 0 money, full life, 0 reputation, and some karma, and you start with 100 quality. So quality is a quality-adjusted life year. It's a year of life lived in the optimal state of health. So when you are actually making a decision whether to, cure a child with leukemia or 5 grandmothers with brain tumors, you have limited amount of resources, you see how many quality-adjusted life years you generate in total. So in the case of a kid, it's going to be maybe like 60, 70 qualities. In the case of 5 grandmothers, let's say they have each 10 years to live, 5 in quality, maybe 5 in high quality life, you are generating 25 qualities. So yeah, you have to cure a kid. If those grandmothers have, let's say, 30 years to live, and then, let's say 15 years in high quality life, then you actually have to go for grandmothers. So there is a kind of quality karma. So you generate some number of qualities, and you actually lose those qualities as you live, right? So at the end of life, you end up with some money that you can pass to your offspring. You have empty life kind of chamber. Currently, we haven't found a way to transform money into life, unfortunately. So that's what we are working on. You can get some reputation, and you can get some karma, let's say 200 qualities. So if you reproduce, if you have a kid, let's say they live for another 100 years in quality life, or like 3 kids, you probably get around 200 qualities. But that's not really great number, right? And if you're a good doctor, you might save a lot of lives, but you are really not saving them. You're marginally postponing death and suffering. So you might generate a few thousand qualities. So again, quality of adjusted life years, a very interesting concept. Go to Wikipedia and look at it. You can optimize your life for generating maximum number of qualities. And at Insilico, we actually try to maximize qualities for every decision we take. So it's also one of the most altruistic and egoistic endeavors in human history. So previously, people really didn't think about that because increasing lifespan significantly was not possible. And right now, there are many technologies that allow us to do that, and that are coming online and allow us to do that. So from the personal perspective, if you increase quality, you can play longer the game of life if you like it. So more entertainment, more happiness. If you do it on the kind of societal level, it's also great because it changes values. So you stop worrying about kind of short-term events and tensions between nations, and look at like more global things. How do we become a multi-planetary civilization? How do we accelerate evolution? How do we get more entertainment for happiness? How do we create more interesting video games and go to the next level of recursion? So every decision you take, you can actually quantify as qualities, and if you increase the life of every human on the planet, you are the quality billionaire, 7.5 qualities immediately. The only way to do that is actually, one of the ways to do that, and the most effective way to do that is to go into aging research. And the most effective way to do this is probably join our company. Because at Insilico, we're committed to maximizing global qualities. We think that aging research seems to be the most promising area for quality maximization globally. I also published several papers showing that it presents a great opportunity for developed nations to increase economic growth. And it turns out that deep learning helps advance aging research more than any other area. And also, aging research helps advance deep learning because you can do this kind of feature analysis, deep feature selection, permutation feature importance on very, very holistic process like aging. You're not looking at cancer, which is kind of like looking at pieces of the broken glass. And aging is not very different from many diseases. So for AI purposes, we actually treat aging as a disease. And also another very important thing is that delaying aging will have greater impact on everything, on curing cancer. And there are papers on that. And actually, or curing cardiac disease or preventing Alzheimer's. Still, if you delay age retardation, you get maximum economic benefit and maximum life benefit. So we believe that aging is a disease for AI purposes. So regardless of how you view it from a philosophical standpoint or from a medical standpoint, the best alternative is to actually train deep neural networks on age, build age predictors, to get a very holistic view on damage accumulation, and then you can transfer some of those features onto diseases with transfer learning. And again, as I mentioned, when you're looking at cancer or any other disease, you're looking at many pieces of the broken glass. If you're looking at aging, you look at this process in time, and you can capture the really minute differences between today and tomorrow that you do not see. Deep neural networks have the ability to capture those very simple, small, tiny biological changes, because we are our age. So I today am very different from myself tomorrow, and I'm much more different today than I was 20 years ago. I was actually probably further from myself 20 years ago from myself with Alzheimer's, or with some other disease. So I already accumulated a lot of damage. Well, maybe not Alzheimer's, but other serious disease. And recently, I highly recommend looking at this paper. I just published it just a couple of weeks ago in Aging Research Reviews. It's a high-impact journal in aging, and it basically covers the entire story I'm going to tell you right now in much greater detail and with references to prior work. So AI can be used for multiple areas of aging research. So one, geroprotector discovery. So you can actually build signatures of aging and then identify anti-signatures of aging for a variety of molecules, and also many other interventions. So you can identify geroprotectors. Some of those geroprotectors have other beautiful properties, like, for example, radio protection or protection from other forms of stress. So it might enable you to be more stress resistant and live next to the nuclear reactor or travel into space. So instead of minimizing pollution in the environment, you can actually build a better human using geroprotectors. There are multiple aging clocks. So one of the major revolutions transpiring right now and started in 2013 with the first publication of Stephen Horvath's methylation aging clock out of UCLA. You should read that paper, Genome Biology, 2015. He wrote it as a single author, so it's really, really cool to read it. He basically used I discovered it, well, not we. Highly cited paper. And then our group developed 17 aging clocks so far. 3 clocks we published, and many are in development, and we also focused on multimodal aging clocks. You can use aging AI for biomarker development, compound similarity scoring, so look at what pharmaceuticals are similar to nutraceuticals, etc. We can do AI for cross-species aging research, so to compare how aging in mice is similar to aging in humans, and target ID, so what you have just covered, Lily, in your talk beautifully. So you did it for cancer, you can do it for aging. If you do it for aging and do it then for other diseases, you can really do it at massive scale. And I must say that autoencoders for dimensionality reduction for gene expression data, I can tell you why it's not going to work. And usually those papers end on archive, not on peer-reviewed journals, and usually they are not great. But for a hackathon, it's a good idea. So what we do a lot is we collect multiple data types from people of different ages, sometimes ideally from the same human. So genome, transcriptome, proteome, methylome, and you train the deep neural network to predict age. And then you can do feature extraction, so either using PFI or DFS or other techniques. We developed some of the techniques ourselves since 2016. You can identify pathways, you can identify targets, and most importantly, you can infer causality. You can build causal graphs. And that really tells you what is important in aging, what is important in various diseases, and also allows you to build not only aging clocks, but also disease clocks. So right now I'm working with several diseases that kind of start small. If you very quickly kind of put this fire off, you can eliminate it. When it starts manifesting into various symptoms like fibrosis, sclerosis, you need various completely different approaches to approach and eliminate the problem, and you actually won't eliminate this problem, you will just treat symptoms. To be able to go back to the causal root is sometimes even impossible. So one important application of GANs is synthetic data. So it's an extremely important application of GANs also for aging research. So on this picture, we didn't do anything with hair, just a conceptual representation of what you can do. You can actually move population generation, individual generation, in time by just manipulating one feature, age. And GANs that learn biology, and also if you introduce reinforcement learning in some cases, they actually reconstruct the other features pretty much in the same way they should be. So I can generate a 70-year-old with, let's say, melanoma, and we will see several mutations that specifically related to melanoma, but also related to other forms of damage that come from aging. So this is very important. And I mean, on this screen, you probably see that if I can do some cosmetics procedures here, I actually would look younger. And on some data types, it's very, very valuable, therapeutically viable. You can do the same on cellular level, so do cellular senescence, or do it on single level, or bulk gene expression, protein expression, and other data type, acetylome, imaging data. You can all get that into multimodal predictors and infer targets, and also understand what data type is more valuable. So most people are saying, okay, I've got this much data, so much gene expression data. Do you have phenotypic data? Did you measure acetylome? No. So maybe it's not, maybe your drug that is going to eliminate this phenotype is working specifically on acetylome and you don't have it. It's important to measure everything. And aging clocks actually tell you a lot about the value of data. So you can do data economics using aging research. So I'll skip a few things, but you can read it from this paper. So we have one really cool tool. It's not a deep learning tool. It's a way to reduce dimensionality in gene expression data. So you group genes into networks and then evaluate the state change of the network in time or between the various, let's say, state conditions like norm and cancer. And it's used ubiquitously in academia. We are developing a tool that will be soon openly available for everybody. And we decided to use, in 2014, 2015, we decided to have a really cool hypothetical experiment. So how about we build disease signatures using this algorithm? So profile gene expression data and other forms of data between young patients and old patient cells, and then use the Broad Institute's connectivity map and links data to see if we can build anti-signatures of aging in a variety of cell types. And then we got an idea, why don't we actually develop natural compounds that induce those anti-signatures of aging, launch them as nutraceuticals. People are taking them anyway, so let's see if we can collect the data back and see if we were right or wrong, and measure a variety of biomarkers in the real world. So we partnered with, we published a couple papers, did some experimental validation. We partnered with one of the largest nutraceutical vendors in the States. They allow you to do annual blood tests or regular blood tests reasonably cheaply with LabCorp. So you send your vial of blood back, and it measures more than 300 biomarkers. So they actually invested in the company as well, so really good guys. And we launched several nutraceutical products in the US. So about 130,000 people are using my products right now, developed using not AI, well, some are developed using AI, some are more parametric algorithms. And we're trying to capture the data back into using aging clocks, using a system called Young-End in the cover. But what we are very interested in is how those nutraceuticals and, of course, how our other products and how pharmaceuticals are affecting a variety of clocks. So there are many clocks out there. So Horvath's clock, Hahnemann epigenetic aging clock, which is almost as accurate as Horvath's epigenetic aging clock. Usually you measure them with mean absolute error, so it's basically plus minus how well you get the age, and R square is usually the metric of consistency of the marker. We published one on the blood biochemistry. We have many others. Actually, Anastasia here, she published a really, really cool clock on the skin imaging, and she has like, I don't know how many clocks trained on skin. So one of the really top companies in that area. There is transcriptomic aging clock. We have our own. Telomere clock, we have microbiologic aging clock, so multiple aging clocks. and those clocks measure different things. So there is a professor at Duke University, very young guy, very smart. He compares all kinds of aging clocks by their biological relevance and looks at how they compare to each other. So we see that they do not correlate very well. So you need to see what kind of aging clock your nutraceutical or pharmaceutical or any kind of other intervention hits, just to understand the value of this data type for your product. So another interesting idea we had is we took about 8 million blood tests from 3 populations, Eastern Europeans, Canadians, Koreans, and trained deep neural nets on more or less healthy people, so 50,000 from each group, to predict the age. I mean, 20 features is very little, right? And usually you would expect, linear regression to outperform, but no, deep neural networks outperform, and they allow you to do much more with this data and also combine it with many other data types. So here we also added population group as a feature and trained on every population group, but then we also did one really cool thing. So we trained, let's say, on Canadians, and then tested on Koreans and tested on Eastern Europeans, and showed that Koreans look older to the deep neural net, younger to the deep neural net trained on Canadians, very similar to pictures, for example, and Eastern Europeans, if you test Eastern Europeans on a Canadian deep neural net predictor, they look older. And right now we have a paper coming up in Nature Scientific Reports showing that they can also predict smoking status reasonably accurately, and also we show that smoking accelerates aging in a variety of population groups. Also, another important thing, we tested it on a really cool data set from the US, Enhance, a very popular data set, and showed that people who are predicted to be 5 years or older, they have much higher hazard ratio, so they have a much higher chance of dying of all-cause mortality, so of any kind of cause. And people who are predicted to be younger, they actually have much lower probability of dying of pretty much anything. And we have a system called Young AI. You're free to go and use it. We have currently just a few clocks enabled, like photographic blood test, there is wearable, and there is transcriptomic aging clock. But internally we have many others that we allow to others to use. And then you as an individual, you can go in and look at what makes you younger or older. This is not the main business of the company. It's just something that we are exploring in digital medicine space. And it allows you to have a dashboard to see what kind of marker, what kind of aging clock changes in time. Of course, some of them are hugely variable, but over time, they give you a pretty consistent signal. And of course, you probably don't have a selfie taken every day. This system allows you to do that, and allows you to actually, it gives you incentives to take selfies every day in consistent kind of settings. And right now, how much time do I have, or I don't? 5 minutes, okay, thank you. So I'll try to cover what in silico is in 5 minutes. Really difficult, challenging task. So what we do at Insilico, we try to bridge biology, chemistry, and digital medicine in one. So primarily working in biology and chemistry in the kind of same space. This is our modus operandi. This is our kind of core central dogma, what we do. We identify protein targets using multi-omics approach. Once this disease target association is known, we go on to back into prior art. So I monitor about $1.7 trillion worth of grant data coming from multiple sources over the past 25 years, linked to publications, patents, clinical trials. We have a knowledge graph trained with this data. And then I try to see if there is any other signal coming from prior art to support and substantiate my hypothesis for target ID. And after that, after I know that the target is more or less, well, it's not validated, but it's there, and or likely there, I generate a new molecule using GANs, and we experimentally validate our approach to do that. Then I run it through a series of predictors, and then I validate it. My major investor and my closest partner, my research lab, is WuXi AppTec. WuXi AppTec is the largest contract research organization on the planet. They are kind of a Ferrari of synthetic chemistry. They have 22,000 synthetic chemists. They are not cheap. They're much more expensive than the US counterpart, than China, but they are a Ferrari. They can synthesize, 5 molecules in a day for you, and that includes like reaction planning and reaction synthesis. So these guys outperform everybody. Usually they do an enzymatic assay for us, and sometimes in vivo assay. and then we license those molecules to somebody. Those are kind of, so we are building a vertically integrated system, also with digital medicine part. We also do clinical trial outcomes prediction, working for a lot of pharma companies as kind of slave labor, but sometimes as a kind of a really cool engine, depending on what we want to achieve. We publish some of those results in good journals, kind of to feed the salami pieces to the public, but we are building the entire kind of salami. So I want to cure diseases very quickly now. And organs for small molecules is something that we're pretty famous for. So it took us about 2 years in theoretical phase to basically, we were, putting out proofs of concept out there without experimental validation. And then in about September, October last year, we decided to start synthesizing and testing. So this step usually costs you about 100K to 200 to 300K US. So it's a very expensive step to make. So if you have to be very confident in your GAN. So if you're doing it with visual images, you can basically very quickly validate. Here you need to synthesize, send it to an enzymatic assay. You need to have molecular precision, atomic precision. So we failed a couple of times. Then so WuXi tested it. But then in February, March this year, these guys, they're medicinal chemists, realized, oh, in silico is doing something really cool. And they are succeeding somehow. So they tested a couple of our molecules for JAK, EGFR, BRAF targets, and I have currently best-in-class EGFR and BRAF dual inhibitor. So nobody, like pharma, spent years on that. For me, it was just kind of I was trying to test one on my young, and they invested in us, and they started partnering very, very closely. So right now I'm more in China than anywhere else. That's why you have the Chinese characters in there. I know I don't have the time to go through experimental validation, but we actually validate that in multiple targets in JAK kinases, 70% generation conditions met. We showed that even for like something very simple, such as focused library generation, we outperform humans by far and outperform even well-established contract research organizations. I can generate molecules that hit some of the very famous targets at picomolar concentration, so we basically get pretty much to the same level as an antibody. I can at the same time hit another one, BRAF, at nanomolar, low-digit nanomolar concentration. So when medicinal chemists look at it, they get kind of what we call it the Hop W effect. It's kind of like a wow. And it's very specific, so it doesn't hit many other kinases. And currently, it outperforms pretty much everything in pharma. And this guy spent years or even decades working and polishing the molecules. For us, it was a test. And we published a few of those molecules, so I'll skip that, but you can go and look at this paper, so entangled conditional adversarial quarter for the null molecular design. And here we published the JAK3 inhibitor that hits JAK3 but not JAK2. Internally, we have JAK1 inhibitors that do not hit JAK2, outperform pretty much everything. And we have many, many, many other molecules for specific targets. So this is actually superhuman. So if you can, this is not a super high, super high inhibition strength, for example, for JAK3, but you can administer it orally. And for some molecules in phase 3, you got even higher, so 10 micromolar inhibition. But what's really cool is that for JAK2, which is basically, I think it's like 2 amino acid difference there, you get 17 millimolar, and that's like, woof, everybody's looking at that, and every medicinal chemist who did those kind of tests really applauds those results. And we have we basically created kind of an ecosystem in the longevity space, so we currently work with many, many, many small biotech companies developing. We also work with big pharma, so GSK is one of our partners, and pretty much 4 out of the top big pharmas work with us in one way or another. I try not to do that as much as possible because it's usually very straining on the company. They treat you as slave labor sometimes. Sometimes they treat you as like a superhuman deep mind guy. And it's also bad. So we like to work with smaller companies, and with smaller companies, like for example, Napa Therapeutics, they focus on NAD pathway. And we have a small molecule discovery program. It's 130 million in milestone payments and royalty primarily, so usually it's delayed revenue. So they take the risk, but we take participation in the future revenue of the company. So if anybody here wants to kind of start a small molecule company, we can provide you with a target and a small molecule, and you can sell. We even will help you fundraise. We have some joint ventures with a New York company called A2A Pharmaceutics. We have some big pharma deals. I'll skip that. That's basically our business model. We have some of our own molecules, and we just helped start. This is actually quite important because since there are so many AI companies nowadays, and pretty much everybody who used to use Excel or linear regression in the past or some very primitive deep neural nets, they're basically claiming that they're an AI company, or some companies developing molecules, and they've already stopped being an AI company. They're a development company. They still claim that they're an AI company. So we decided to kind of help the entire community and also work with the governments worldwide and create the Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare Alliance. So to set benchmark, to outreach, to work with regulators. Currently, those are the members, the founding members of this alliance. So first members were us and Numerate in San Francisco, and then AWS joined, and GE. And if you're at JP Morgan this year, you can probably join one of our parties. And this is what it does. You can go to the AIH website and take a look at what they do. So it's also a government lobbying group, which, well, not lobbying, it's a bad word to say. It's a government kind of regulatory educator, which tries to promote rapid R&D in drug discovery. Because while we are testing, or while we are following the old paradigm, patients are dying. And that's the worst thing, and especially with rare diseases. That's why I applaud CAI, good guys. That should be kind of put on mass scale and maybe commercialized, or you kind of create a commercialization factory using this approach. But I think that you need to kind of level up in terms of data science, even though you're in Silicon Valley. I think that kind of end-to-end drug discovery pipelines are important. So you need to find people from here and actually maybe cater to these guys. With rare disease patients, I would love to do target ID on all kinds of data, but I don't think transcriptomics, depending on where you got them, that's the only data type we need to collect. But this kind of alliances will help explain to the regulators why they need to advance AI-powered R&D. Because pharma companies, they're saying, okay, we've seen it all in 2000, then in 2005, then in 2008, so those hype cycles, we don't want to invest, we don't want to, we will invest internally, but it's a tool, it's not a solution. Well, I think in some areas, AI outperformed my greatest expectations. So you can actually go from 0 to 1. And that's what happened with us in chemistry, for example. 3 years ago, if you were to tell me that we were doing chemistry, you'd say, what the hell? Get out of here. I don't have resources. And suddenly, boom. So it really changes the company's lifestyle. And these are my contacts. We're currently in 9 countries. We have physical offices in 4. In Taiwan, in Taipei in China, we do have 12 people doing deep learning. We'll also have an educational program. We are moving into China in a very big way next year. So thank you very much. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'll stick around for a little while. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for your extremely informative presentation. I think we have time for just one question, if anyone. Okay then, thank you.
Thank you.
And please welcome our next speaker, Anastasia Georgievskaya, Youth Laboratories, with presentation on AI in skincare and beauty. Please welcome.
Hello everyone. First of all, thank you so much for attending this session and the organizers for inviting me, and definitely the previous speakers for wonderful presentations. I was a little under pressure because of what I will be telling now. Can I have my slide back for me? Okay, so actually many factors contribute to our health, and definitely the way we look and the way our skin looks contributes to both aesthetically, mentally, and the health aspect. As was mentioned before, aging is really a disease, and if I ask you how much years you would like to live more, you are likely to say more than 50, I guess. But just imagine at what state would you like to live them. Most likely you would like to be active, healthy, and light joyful. So our company focuses on studying aging from the aspects of beauty and with computer vision. Actually, if you ask a biologist what kind of biological data they use, it's likely to be omics data. But actually, we just during our life cycle, we generate a lot of data which can be very predictive and useful, helpful for a lot of aging research. We started to focus on imaging data because due to the progression of different social media, people are likely to make pictures. It's widely available and quite cheap source of data, which actually I will show later on. Some of the experiments is very predictive. And so everyone knows that looking healthy and good younger for your age is associated with good health. But quite often very evident things are not proved until that they're not scientific ones. And I think one of the very important research that was done, I think about 6 years ago, was showing that among two identical twins, the one who looked older was dying younger in 80% of cases. Also, the effect of smoking is quite evident. People who smoke look older, and it can sound really silly, like why do people have to make research on that, because it's evident. But again, until it is proved and reported, it's not science. So we started back in 2015 with developing the first mobile app for tracking your wrinkles, like biomarkers of aging. So what we realized with this project, I guess from some perspective it failed, because it showed it was impossible to track any age-associated features with just mobile phone, because the unstandardized data collection and the ununiformness of the method how you do that would fail the idea. But what we got, what was very useful, the insight from the consumers and our future clients, B2B, who said that they're interested in new tools for identifying biomarkers, visual biomarkers, and photographic ones. So we a little bit postponed this idea, but set on a mission to develop new non-invasive biomarkers of aging. Then to again pilot and pilot the idea and build the community of developers, we launched the first beauty contest judged by robots. So actually the idea would seem crazy, but you were just guess how many people were interested, because we had about 20,000 entries from all worldwide countries. What was very interesting is that the contribution from men and women was equal, so it means that the paradigm of skincare is changing, and now men are paying more attention to how they look. It was quite interesting discovery. So we also managed to collect a data set of selfies and develop the first method for standardization of data collection with mobile devices. We launched 2 competitions, and then we actually used this data set to further adjust what we're doing to mobile and IoT. What we actually do, we track the multiple features of the face. We separate the parameters according to categories. One of them is explicit parameters, so it's endpoint measurements that you can have at a particular time point. But what we believe is more important, what is more important, you can track implicit parameters. So what would be your individual reaction to different adverse conditions, or maybe change in your lifestyle? Because in the end, you don't want to be approached like everyone else in the room. Like everyone is wanting to have personalized treatments, personalized gadgets, and of course personalized skincare is there. Again, I think everyone here in the room knows that there are a lot of advances in computer vision in general, and in general artificial intelligence, but still in the specific area like skincare, it's far away from being perfect. So a question can emerge, why do you need new age predictors? Because, for example, you have HowlNet that can predict your age with quite good accuracy. So if you're 20 years old, quite unlikely it will predict you 60. But just imagine what happens. You upload a picture, and what usually the pipeline for age prediction will be doing, it will be detecting your face, like just the bounding box, cropping out of the picture and send to the neural network. But before it sends it to a neural network, it will likely resize it to a standard input size, which is about 300 megapixels to 300 megapixels. And if you just crop by yourself this kind of image from modern, even cell phone, you will see it's a really small area. So what you are doing, you're losing valuable information. What would be more interesting is to take the high resolution pictures of skin, which actually possess lots of features included into your skin health, and send them to the neural network. This is what we're actually doing, and we not only predict age, but we discover these valuable features. What we also saw like a proof of concept, we used our algorithms for age prediction for identifying the premature aging syndromes in people who were not diagnosed premature aging before. So we correlated this data with multiple omics data and different biomarkers based on such matters like DNA, methylation, and blood biochemistry. So we did this work in collaboration with University of Copenhagen, a very great group of Medvestnik-TVs who are working on identifying the progeria, actually premature aging syndromes. And then we decided, okay, now we see that algorithms can really tell the premature aging. Let us now identify the biomarkers of aging, photographic ones that we can use for widely available diagnostics and reliable ones. Actually, you usually need to have some priority knowledge, and it was very luckily that we already had industrial partners like cosmetic companies who gave us little bit clues that skin around skin is likely to be the most predictive part. We used high resolution images to train our photo age clock to predict age with accuracy we managed to achieve with 2.3 years. And here I present the results of the gold standard method for ventilation clock. As you see, it's even better. But it's much more cheaper, so we just need a picture. And then we also wanted to identify if it's actually skin that makes a contribution to the prediction. So we made some experiments occluding steadily the eye area, so you see it's like 4 iterations. And we saw that actually when you occlude just the eye, the prediction doesn't drop that much. When you're occluding the area of wrinkles and around eye, the accuracy would be dropping much more. And then now we really see that prediction is performed from skin area. Actually, afterwards we made an experiment of age prediction just from skin area, and we may say that the accuracy is a mean average error of 5 years. So I think Alex, you were presenting before that it's comparable with DNA methylation. So we published a paper on it recently, just in I think early November, so you can have a look at it. Why is it important to you train on quite a large data set of images, and you of course have the outliers. Some might say it's better having outliers, meaning that my algorithm is not perfect. It's partly true, but just imagine that actually these outliers give you a lot of valuable insights, because you can identify them and see what metrics they are, what features they have as identical subjects, and identify what contributes to their younger or older look, to use these parameters for target for looking younger. Here's again the comparison of accuracy of our approach. And what is more important, I think I missed a very important thing. So what we did, it was done on professional images obtained in lab conditions. And then you might say, but you know that not everyone can afford a device costing about $1 million for this diagnostic, so what should I do as a consumer? The good thing is that let's say, progression of quality of modern cameras is so great that you can actually predict your age using our photo age clock, even from selfies or from pictures obtained just with usual camera of your phone. But of course you can guess it's just professional picture of George Clooney, not somebody took a photo shot of him. And now let's get closer to what is actually features of skin. If you talk about computer vision, there exist let's say standardized tests, like you would classification task is when you want to say what is the class of the object in the picture. If you would like to also make localization, you should make a bounding box. If you talk about the task of object detection, you have multiple objects, you want to have their bounding boxes again. And one of the most complicated tasks would be segmentation. So if you want to have pixel-wise segmentation, it means you need to assign every pixel a class, if it is an object or not. And the new task we introduced during our research is sorting. So usually in deep learning you would need to have text and annotation for your data, but some it's your dream. Then you come to real life, you understand there is no annotation. So that means you need to develop new methods how to annotate the data. And then we decided, okay, maybe we should use the sorting to introduce it as a new metric and sort images according to different parameters. So for that we developed web-based tools which connected to our server, and we can sort all this data and use it for annotation. We actually played around a little bit with the tools that can enable us a good diagnostic. especially for the task of segmentation. We started this idea from developing for segmentation of eye images, and then it turned out that for many biological source of data, like images of skin art, it's a good method to approach, and now for many segmentation tasks we use stackiness. We'll publish paper on that. If you talk about what kind of images we would be using, this can be highly standardized pictures of face, as I said, from special devices, looking like you are attending an ophthalmologist. Also, selfies can be a solution. Of course, the accuracy can be dropping, but not that much with the recent phones. We use the areas of body and areas of forearm. So actually, it turned out forearm is a very good baseline because the skin is quite thin, like on your face, but it's not exposed to different adverse environmental conditions. So that means you can really track if it is your, let's say, biological feature possessed by, I don't know, your genome, or what is the effect of different environmental changes. The devices we use for collection of data are professional dermoscans, mobile phones, or maybe data which is not directly imaging data. It can be like, it's related, it actually looks like microscope. If you know what, how many of you know what is the atomic microscope? Yeah, so it's actually, you can identify the surface of an object using the piezo effect. So we use this kind of data and combine it with imaging data. But what should I admit? Actually, IoT is entering in the game, and I think you saw like Silicon Valley about smart fridges. So I think the next level will be we're coming to the fridge and it says, please don't add today this croissant because you have pimples, so please stop. Maybe postpone it to the next week. So I should say that any IoT devices that have the camera can also be a solution. Again, imaging is not that easy, as you may see. We use not only images obtained in usual light. It turns out like biophysicists before identified that there are a lot of many suitable regimes for this. For example, using polarized light. That so polarized light is actually reduces the reflection, so you can better work with the parameters associated with color, like pigmentation, underlying tassels, or I don't know, some red spots. And one of the most interesting regimes is fluorescence. So fluorescence is the biological property of some molecules to be excited by the UV light, and then the molecules become excited, and then they want to relaxate to their ground state, and by relaxating the energy, they may emit the quantum of energy in the light, and you will see their fluorescence. I'm not sure how it is visible in this bright light, but actually you have some spots here. On the blue background, it's red or green, and actually this can be bacteria deposits, this particular spot, or for example, based on the fluorescence of blue compounds, it's actually elastin and collagen of skin. You can even identify the thickness of skin, metrics like skin tone. So actually for the persons who can tell between the lines or these pixels, they can identify what metrics you have from fluorescence as well. What we're aiming is to provide the whole possible analysis of your skin based on different metrics, identifying the different patterns of your skin, the, let's say, face integral metrics, or metrics of your particular skin area, like pores, redness, texture. And we're also aiming to build like skin atlas that will be mapping, like heat map of the different parameters of your skin, so that you are likely to change it at your desire. I think today we it was mentioned that we use special techniques for generating synthetic data. So our team is not an exception, and we didn't want to lose the opportunity to come into this game. So what we started from is making style transfers, so using circograms. In the first line, you might see the images that are real, then taken with dermoscan, and you have initially low redness and initially high redness. And then we say, okay, how can I motivate some people to use what they advise, like we're building recommendation assets. But imagine you're looking in a mirror and you see like your overall look, but your skin at magnification might look different. So we wanted to bring some claims and show how your skin will be liking if you're about to follow or not to follow our advice. And here you see that we transfer the style, so we turn red skin into realistic, good-looking skin, like uniform, and turning vice versa, like low redness to high redness. It actually impresses people very much. The second step, which is actually a more sophisticated task, is to generate photorealistic images from noise. So what was a big surprise that you can see is just one epoch. It's like almost math, and there's nothing relevant in this picture. But even after 10 epochs, you see with these pictures looks like real. You like compare this one. After 40 epochs, you're likely to get a synthetic picture without noise, without blur, which will be like photorealistic, like picture of skin. Here's our team, who actually work extensively on this task, and we will be happy to collaborate, and if you would like to join our team, we are hiring. Thank you.
Okay, then I think we have plenty of time to ask some questions. If any... Okay, then, thank you.
Okay, I will be happy to answer later on if you have. Thanks.
I have a question. What should we do to research in Denmark? And what should actually focus on?
There's two options on here to make it actually. What should we do as those who don't want to get older and want to look good all the time? What should we do in order to support our skin as it is when we're 17 or 18? And what should we, universal advice, what should we do in order to stay healthy and live longer? So I'm just looking for kind of a universal advice to everyone in this audience.
So, if I wanted to give you a generic answer to this question, I would say something typical you have already heard, like sleep more, drink more water, keep to a healthy diet, and I could also actually advise it to everyone in this room. But actually, what we're doing is we're trying to escape this approach, not making useless recommendations that actually most of you already tried, but maybe it didn't work. So what I would say to achieve a good look, you should start measuring your biomarkers. Like you can start from photographic biomarkers, so blood biochemistry biomarkers, and then you actually need a series of, series of measurements, like to understand your body type, and then you should really play around. So you see how your aging clock will be changing in response to different interventions, and I think this is the best way, like scientifically proved, to extend your healthy longevity and improve your look and stay healthy, young, active for as long as possible.
Now I need to find this one.
Now I need to give you my business card.
Or you can go and work for House AI. That's the most valuable advice. If you are a trained professional, or if you're very eager and trainable, then you're going to quickly acquire soft skills and contribute to the movement. If not, just wait for them to launch the act.
How long will it take?
Sorry?
How long will it take to get to the work?
Actually, we already collaborate about 1.5 years with 5 largest cosmetic companies worldwide, and we're now predominantly working B2B, but I think in a time frame of 1 year we will be releasing to the B2C market as well.
Thank you very much. And our next speaker, Maxim Sharayev from Skolkovo Institute of Science and Technology on neurotechnologies and machine learning, from neurosurgery to neurology to neuroeducation and cybersport.
Thank you. So my name is Maxim Sharayev. I'm from Skoltech, and today I'm going to make a brief overview on our projects in biomedical initiative. And part of this biomedical initiative is neurotechnologies and neuroimaging methods and machine learning for different areas of medicine, education, and cybersport. The majority of these tasks are represented in poster sessions, so you could just see them in the hall. And I will talk briefly first on the problem setting, so why we perform different tasks. Then I will say some words about the data and methods that we use, and then a quick overview on the results that we already have up to now. So these are our partners. We have here medical partners, educational, and scientific partners. Among them, famous Institute of Neurosurgery and the Center of Speech Pathology, High School of Economics, and Skolkovo Gymnasium provide us with data, tasks, problem setting, their expertise, and they accompany us during the whole process of development, and on each step they give us the expertise and their ideas what to develop next and how it works now. There are three main kinds of tasks that we have, and we can split them into classification and regression tasks when we need to create a system which helps a doctor to give a diagnosis or prognosis of a particular treatment and the outcome. There are mapping and localization tasks when we need to find something on a picture or in the brain or in a particular area of the brain. And there are some correlational or meta tasks when we analyze our predictions, the dependencies between our predictions and different indicators like behavioral data or clinical data and so on. So first, an example of classification and regression tasks that we have. This is inspired by our medical partner, the Research Center for Obstetrics, Gynecology and Thanatology. This is devoted to epilepsy classification and finding biomarkers and foci of epileptogenic areas in the brain. So why it is important? Because there are some cases when drugs do not help people with epilepsy, and the only one way to cure them is just to perform a surgical resection and of a particular area of the brain which is responsible for seizures. And it is quite hard to find this area on MRI images because of different of many kinds of noise and processes, and not all doctors can find and see which particular area is responsible for these seizures. Our partners provide us with labeled data, and we try to build a predictive model to find these possible foci of epilepsy on new images of different modalities. And the motivation here is twofold. The first is that this could dramatically reduce time for even experienced doctor to find these areas, because it takes usually from 2 to 3 hours for a doctor. And for a non-experienced radiologist, it could highly increase the performance, even if we achieve the accuracy of 80 or 70 or 80% of how it performs a good doctor. Another kind of problem when we have mapping or localization tasks, and this is another task to find brain functional areas for pre-surgical planning, which is performed with our partner Medvestnik Institute. And here we aim at finding functional areas in the brain responsible for different functions like language, movement, vision, and so on. So this is very important before the operation, because the aim of the neurosurgeon is to resect the tumor as large as possible and to minimize the damage to functional areas. So we need to find this balance, and it's good to plan it before the operation, when doctors can communicate and plan their access to this tumor and plan the volume of resection. So here we obtain not only structural but functional MRI data, which is reflecting brain activity, and here we try to predict where a particular area in the brain is situated. This is a hard task for patients with brain lesions and brain tumors like gliomas, because the localization of these areas is largely known for healthy people. But if a person has some problems and some, for example, a tumor in the brain, these areas could migrate, and we need to find the new localization of this area. Moreover, when performing the operation, new data is available, because during the operation these functional areas are mapped more precisely by conventional methods. And when a resection is performed, due to tissue move, our model, which we built before the operation, becomes non-valid, and we need to obtain some online data from neural navigation equipment just to adjust our model to incoming data. So this is the plan for this task in the near future. And the correlational task, first of all, is connected with neuroeducation, and this is inspired by an increasing number of companies like Squirrel AI, which provide a product to personalized approach of education, where they try to assess unique needs for each person, and they create a profile. They try to understand the learning levels, strengths, and weaknesses of each person, and they call it AI adaptive learning. And we want to introduce here new objective neuroimaging markers. We work here with HSC and Cultural Gymnasium. So to these behavioral indexes that they can measure, we add neuroimaging markers like EEG, ultrasound data, functional MRI, and this could so these markers are objective, and we aim at finding how they correlate with children's abilities, their accuracies, reaction times when they're performing some tests and some tasks at school. And we also use data from trackers like personal watch and so on, and this could be also helpful to make these predictions. And another task which is highly connected with the previous one is the application of neurotechnologies in cybersport. The motivation is first that in Skoltech we have our own professional team of esport, and the second is that up to now there is no available tool which helps trainers of this team to assess mental abilities and training mental assessment of each person of the team. So some coaches say that they now only rely on their own expertise and visual feedback, and not on some objective measures or on science. So here we want to address the following problems which are important for cybersport teams. The first is how quick they could react under pressure. Next, how they could sustain their concentration over time, and how they allocate their mental resources during the tournament and so on. And so this project is performed with Skoltech Cyber Academy, and so here we try to find the biomarkers of performance of a team and individual player in the game. And what is more interesting for us as scientists, we could collect lots of labeled data when these guys sit in equipment like EEG, eye tracking, pulse, heart rate, spin conductors, and so on. And these lots of data could be for us a starting point for other projects like basic monitoring and the operators' performance and so on. So what kinds of data we have here? So first of all, we have multimodal high-dimensional MRI data, which is structural MRI. This is three-dimensional images of the brain. And this functional MRI, which is represented by a series of three-dimensional images. So this data, it has good spatial but bad temporal resolution. It's extremely noisy and has correlation of nature, fMRI data. We also use EEG, which has good temporal but bad spatial resolution, is also very noisy. So this is electroencephalogram, and also we use clinical or behavioral data, which could be represented as text or digits like treatment outcome, medical history, case records, accuracy, reaction time, and so on. And in order to work with this multimodal data, we introduced and created a platform, because all these different kinds of data are used in different tasks. And if we create one pipeline with standardized methods for data pre-processing, analysis, inference, and validation, this could be much easier to maintain these projects in one platform. So the general flow here is that we could use deep learning approaches on raw data when we have good amount of data, which is true for example, cybersport and neuroeducation. And sometimes for image segmentation in epilepsy discovery. And we can use low-dimensional representation of data. Here we have many approaches which were developed at Skoltech and which were taken from other papers and works. these methods are domain-specific. When we work with brain imaging data, and they could be just conventional dimension reduction methods. In the end, here we want to obtain vector metrics for classification or prediction. And so here, what we have up to now, just a brief overview of results of each of these projects. So regarding epilepsy discovery, now we can, based on low quality 1.5 Tesla structural MRI data, we can predict the presence of epilepsy with accuracy of 80% with a fixed false positive and true positive rate, which is the demand of the doctors, the clinics, because they need to fix false positive rate and see how it works. We can find some biomarkers of epilepsy, but the segmentation still doesn't work, so we are still collecting labeled data, and this is an ongoing stage of the project. So this is regarding patients' resections and planning of operations. Now we have finished the first step, and we have satisfactory results to be tested by neurosurgeons in practice. So this is the comparison of our prediction and real brain map of the images which was obtained during the operation. And now we are on the second stage when we combine the results obtained by neurosurgeons. We fuse it with our imaging data to improve model quality, but this is in offline mode. So we get the data of past operations, and we try to implement this data into our models for better prediction. And in future, we plan to integrate the system into a neural navigation system to obtain online real-time data. We have partners in Germany and some Russian manufacturers of neurosurgical navigation systems, and so this is the long-going plan. When we obtain good quality offline, we will try to implement it into our models online. And this is the example of cybersport. So this is our system that we built. The person is sitting in front of eye tracker, and you can see the heat map of eye tracker on the left. He is sitting in EEG cap, heart rate, skin conductance, and accelerometers on his head. Some different kinds of sensors of muscle activity on his right and left hand, how he pushes the keyboard, how he works with mouse, and how he sits on the chair. So whether he is nervous, he's moving on the chair or not. And all this multimodal data is recorded, and the biggest challenge was just to synchronize this data. And now we built this platform, and we started making predictions on this data. So the first and maybe obvious one was that you can distinguish between experienced and newbie players based on eye tracking map. For example, professional players, they have very dense eye tracking map, and so they look only at one point in the screen. And if a person is not experienced, he looks in many places, and maybe this takes too much time, and that's why he loses. So this platform now is developed, and we are obtaining new data on these guys. So what's the conclusion? That we have this direction of neuroimaging and studies in Stoltec, and we apply here new methods. We have concrete problems and work with medical and scientific teams who provide us with these tasks, data, and check the results. We have a strong team and with different specialists, including biologists, neuroscientists, mathematicians, and programmers. And so yeah, we have just a couple of interesting results, and now we are ongoing with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are still ready if anyone wants to ask a question.
Thanks for the presentation. So how are you planning to use this system for cyber sportsmen? Is it likely that you will recommend professional teams to, let's say, change the team, or is it a project for fun, or it's oriented for B2C or B2B companies?
Now it is focused on our own team. It's called Tech, because we have our team. and we have trainers there, and they are those guys on which we make our experiments. So then during their trainings, we put this equipment on them, and the idea is, yes, to create a tool which could help the trainer to assess their performance and maybe change the tactics, the strategy of training to understand some mental states of different guys, how they perform, what happens, and so on. This is yeah, it has some aim, like a business aim.
Sorry, do you have like plans maybe extending this for pilots with any other businesses where a lot of dedication?
Yes. So this is what I say. So this could be the first step of collecting data. First, we'll have lots of these time series, and what is very good here that it is labeled already, because at each time you know what happened in the game. So when a person was shot, it means that he was disappointed, and if he strikes a goal, then it means that he was happy, and you can correlate all that you get on your graphics with real things that happened in the game. And after it, you can try to build models and then to using. I'm just thinking, just use some transfer learning, yes, and to try to apply it somewhere, like for operators, pilots, and so on.
It's a good way to start from some entertainment to real life goals.
Yes.
And thank you for a great speech, and thanks to all speakers today. Actually, I have a question to all participants. Luckily, they are all here. Could you tell me a few cases or organizations which work with AI in dentistry field? I know that dentistry doctors, dentistry, yeah, right. Because I know that the dentistry doctors are not fake doctors, but still it's very interesting. I'm trying to find at least one AI project which has a use case or focused on dental market. Yeah, right. Thank you. Actually, if other speakers can join the answer, it would be awesome.
I suppose Evgeny can tell a couple of words on dental market because he's present here and he maybe knows what Ivan Vasilidis is doing with dental images and so on. If it's possible.
Well, I can comment just two small comments. First of all, I know several startups. They collected a set of dental images or orthophotograms, and they made labeling so they can detect regions and teeth with problems, and then detect problems for particular types of illness. And also we are also doing some small-scale experiments. And the main problem here is to find the appropriate data.
Okay, there is one example actually. So there is a company called Masquerade from Belarus. Have you heard of them? Yeah, Facebook acquired them for quite some money. Right. So basically, they're doing now, and they're moving to the dental case in Israel. So you might check this out. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay then, thank you. Thank you for a great presentation. And I would like to remind to all of those who attend today that we will have an after party at Pravda Bar at 8 p.m. today. So we hope to see you there. And thank you for your attention today. It was a long day. And